like to just invite you to trust your boundaries. This is supposed to be safe for you, so really just trust what you want to share and only that. And we're talking about the 3 different centers of intelligence. The instinctual center is a type, there should be diagrams circulating around. I'm going to refer a lot to the Enneagram, so if there's not one in front of you, look next to you and you can share with your neighbor. The 8, 9, and 1 are the types that sit at the top of the diagram, and they refer to the types that filter the world through their gut center, through this knowing without thinking or feeling that I was talking about. And type 8, Dustin, we call a lot of things. We call the boss, the protector. Type 8 comes to teach the rest of us about truth and about justice. Type 8s have a sense of when that's not so. And I'll tell you, it's really something to be loved by an 8, because 8s will protect the people that they care about that are in their field. They are a fierce protector of the truth. And the young 8 gets this idea, though, that the world takes advantage and only the strong survive. And so the 8 figures out where's the power and who's got it, and how do I make sure that somebody doesn't take it away from me. Raise your hand if you identify with an 8. You might not be the only one in the room. A couple of you, right? And there's an intelligence in that for type 8. And it sets up a challenge, because the 8 has an emotional driver that we call lust. Comes from the German word Lust, which means life force. And it could include sexual lust, but for a lot of 8s, they don't even relate to it like that. It's much more about being, if something's good, let's just take it over. If something's bad, let's annihilate it. There's no black and white for type. There's no gray area for type 8. Type 8. Everything is black and white, in or out, yes or no. And this is the driving energy of type 8. Do you relate to this?
Yes. What I like most about it is the drive to has its ups and downs, of course, but on the positive side, like when it comes like to education or advancements in work or even physical strength, stuff like that, I always want more. I want more, and I push and push to the limits, and I always try to get that next step up. And
I'm going to stop you there, Dustin, because I know that's true about you, but I also know a little bit more about you. And I think what you're already starting to describe is the personality. The push and the ego is the need to be against. That's what 8 does in its more contracted sense. So I'm asking you a harder question to lead with. Think about you and small animals. What is the part of you that's strong?
So, like, I grew up on a farm, and so I didn't have a whole lot of friends out around me when I was younger, from childhood all the way up to like 14, 15, and so I built relationships like with the farm animals out there. Those were my friends. That's who I hung out with. That's who, I'd go out there and I had like a bond with them, and that was like friendship for me, and you want me to go like tell the whole
And as you describe that, what are you feeling?
Sadness right now. I feel sadness. It brings back memories, because I had a lot of, I had a great childhood, I had a lot of fun, but at the same time sadness because, later on I had to put them all down myself.
Can I interrupt?
That's what we expect from you, Gabor.
Okay. Is it okay if I argue with you?
Yeah.
I don't mean to argue, but so I travel all over the place, and I give talks on addiction and illness and so on. And every once in a while somebody says, I had a great childhood. And right away I never believe them, okay? So I don't believe you either, okay? Don't take it personally.
I don't.
Okay. Can I ask you a few questions?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about your great childhood.
So it was a small, close-knit family, grandma, grandpa, I had 3 aunts and 4 uncles, and myself. So yeah, okay. So early on, all the males in my family, some got kicked out of state, some were just left.
Some were what?
Just weren't like my dad or nothing. I never met him till
you never met your dad?
Till later on, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
So.
Do you have kids yourself?
Yes.
How old are they?
14, he just turned 14.
Can you remember back Can you remember back to your sons when he was, say, 3 years old?
I was incarcerated. Yeah.
Okay. Can you remember back to when he was 2 years old?
2,
Yeah.
I was incarcerated.
Did you see him at all?
Yeah, I had him until he was 1, and then I got incarcerated and came out when he was 5.
How do you think it felt for him not to have you around?
It was hard for him. Yeah.
Why is that hard?
Because I know it was hard. Because
Okay.
I knew what.
So
it was
how
like.
great is it when you don't have your dad around?
It's that. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, you said you had a great childhood.
I did.
That's why I was
because
arguing.
I still have my grandpa.
That's why I didn't
Yeah.
believe you. Okay, no,
I have
that's
my
the first.
grandpa.
Secondly, how did you feel about not having your dad around?
It didn't bother me until I finally met him.
That's okay.
Yeah.
How old were you when you met him?
I was like 16.
So it bothered you for 16 years.
No, it didn't bother me. Yeah, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me until I met him.
Until you met him.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't know that it bothered you. Is that possible?
Well, for a long time, I thought my grandpa was my dad. I didn't realize he wasn't my dad until.
Did anybody tell you that he wasn't?
Yeah, my mom did when I was like 11, because I always just called him dad.
Did anybody tell you when you were 8 years old that he's not your dad?
No, they just called him Papa. I just assumed.
Okay, I'll come back to this. Did you ever feel sad or angry as a child?
Not so much. I don't think so. Not that I remember.
Nobody ever hit you?
Oh, okay, I take that back. Okay, yeah, so I did. Yeah, so there was a short time, like 8 years, I had a stepfather. And he was verbally abusive and very emotional abusive. And so I wouldn't go home. I'd stay at my grandparents.
And how did you feel when your dad was like that? When your stepdad was like that?
Ultimately, I told my mom I don't ever want to see her again unless she leaves him.
And what did your mom say?
She left him
Right away?
within 6 months. Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's good.
yeah.
All right. Nobody ever bullied you as a kid?
Yeah, I was bullied.
At what age were you bullied?
Probably started around 7th grade.
What did that feel like?
That sucked. Yeah, that was that made me very withdrawn.
Who did you talk to about it?
My pets.
If your son got bullied and you were in his life, who would want him to talk to about it?
He used to talk to me.
But who would you
Yeah.
want him to talk to?
I would want him to talk to.
If you're there as a father.
Yeah, I would want him to talk to me. Yeah.
Okay, if you found out that your son was bullied and it sucked, and this went on for quite some time, and he never talked to you about it, how would you explain that?
I'd feel like I didn't do my job.
I know that's what you feel about
Yeah.
yourself, but how would you explain why he isn't talking to you?
Because he doesn't feel safe.
Doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
You didn't talk to anybody.
Mm-mm.
You didn't feel safe.
Okay, yeah. Guess
How great is it not to feel safe?
Well, I mean, I had a great little imaginary world that I like to live in.
That's what Robin Williams did too. Everybody creates this imaginary world because the real world is too painful.
Yeah.
That imaginary world was your escape.
Yeah.
But when do people have to escape?
Because they're not feeling.
Nothing good.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, that's your great childhood, okay?
Right.
Now, what I'm not saying is that your grandparents didn't love you. But I'm not saying that your mother didn't love you. What I'm not saying is that they didn't do their best. I'm not blaming them. But I'm saying that when you say you had a great childhood, you're kind of pretending to yourself because you're forgetting all the parts that were really, really difficult. The loneliness, the isolation, the sadness of not being listened to, the fear, all that, you're kind of pushing down. And maybe you're doing that for two reasons. Why do you think people would do that? Because you're not doing it deliberately.
Right.
Why would you do it, do you think?
Some of it is because it's stuff that I've overcome.
Okay.
You know, we both.
Fair enough.
Within myself, I've overcome it. Some of it I was able to later on justify for others, I guess you could say, for a means for me to cope with it.
Right.
Other of it would be just matured, I think. And then some of it is just because.
No, but pardon me, but is it Jason or Justin?
Dustin.
Justin, yeah.
Dustin.
Dustin with a D, okay.
Yeah.
Dustin, just 10 minutes ago you said you had a great childhood, okay? And you weren't lying about it, you meant it,
Yeah.
you know? But for some reason, you didn't factor in all these things that you and I just talked about.
So I want to jump in here because
Yeah,
this
go
is
ahead.
actually an important part, and then I want you to speak about it because I know I can feel that you have a lot to say. What we understand about type 8 is that there's a structure. The type 8 provides a systematic way of not having to deal with a really hard childhood. So when I ask you about your 8, you tell me, I'm strong, I do this, and I stopped you. And I know
Right.
I can stop you because I know you're strong enough to tell something deeper. And then you dropped it down and you talked about your animals, which is a far more vulnerable story, but maybe not the whole truth, right? You're getting there. Type 8 has a way of paying attention to how to be strong and avoiding the part of me that's weak. And the mechanism that I use in order to do that is called denial. Denial is a way of cutting off how I feel, like the fight all started when he hit me back. What? I didn't do it. And there's something that's in your structure that allows that to be. So I like how Gabor puts that it wasn't like you're not trying to tell the truth, you're all about the truth, but there's a part of your personality that sort of distorts the truth from you. What do you want to say?
So like this. I tip to not always. I like to put like what I saw like a 10 on a 2, like it was, you know, like or a fish story. The fish was this big, but it really was this big. And so that's how I justify things like that in my mind. And I, with painful things or harder things, I tend to. I just kind of push them down. I push them to the side.
And that works for
Yeah,
a little bit.
It works for me, yeah. And for me, like you said, like a great childhood for me, you know, the way I perceive that, and I know this correlates with the learnings I've done in my type structure, is having the basic needs to survive in life and be able to get through it. You know, so for me, a great childhood is I never went hungry. I had a bed. I remember a whole lot more laughs and joy than hard times. But the hard times I've suppressed.
Okay.
And I've hardened myself to be able to deal with them, and I kind of expect that out of the people I surround myself with. Like, it's not really, you know, I lived through it and I'm doing great, sort of attitude.
Okay, so let me just ask you one final question then, okay? Let's say your son came to you and said, Dad, I've been bullied. I felt alone, I felt scared, I felt isolated, I felt sad, I had nobody to talk to. Would you say to him, nothing to worry about, you had a great childhood, you got all the food you needed, you got shelter, what are you complaining about? Would you say that to your son?
No, and he has actually come to me.
And of course you didn't do that, did you?
No,
And why not?
because it doesn't resolve the problem.
Exactly. So what I'm suggesting to you here, Dustin, is that it's easier for you to be compassionate towards other people sometimes than towards yourself.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, because the way you would treat your son is not how you're talking about yourself. Okay, you got that?
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting that maybe there's more work you could do to become more compassionate towards yourself as well.
That's kind of the process. That's actually the stage I'm at.
Great.
This term, me being here now, is actually what kind of really opened my eyes to that, because I've pushed myself to limits to where I've literally broken my body. You know, broke my back and from overwork. I have an amazing story. You know, that's in retrospect, it really is an amazing story, and of my whole life. But I've always everything out and trying to motivate and build other people to where I've never really focused on myself
Right.
or my health or anything to where I deteriorated and self-destructed.
Right.
And I've really, this here really opened my eyes, and I was never really aware of it until I started actually doing the work and the readings of the Enneagram book and really kind of looking into myself, and then that's kind of where
Well,
I'm at right now.
Well, thank you for your willingness to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. So I'd like to just put a little cap on it in terms of the Enneagram, that the habit of the 8 is to push. The pushing is the mimicry of that inherent strength that you have. And the ticket, the price of admission for type 8 is vulnerability. And so it's an entirely different kind of strength. And you're all over it. You're all over it.
I'm barely tapping into that now.
Right.
I really am like tapping into it this time around, to where I'm really looking at myself and a lot of stuff about myself this time. So.
I feel you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pass that mic. So I'd like everybody to take a breath. It's vulnerable to work on ourselves, and there's an extraordinary vulnerability in the room. So thank you for being part of that. And the way you listen will really impact the way the panel is allowed to share. Someone taught me that. Type 4, Roach?
Yes.
Is a type that sits in the heart center of intelligence, and 4s are the type that let us know what's authentic. Gabor's earlier word. 4s are the type that want to go deep. They want to bring meaning to the world. We need the 4, and if we didn't have the 4, we wouldn't be expressing deeply felt experience. We call type 4 the artist. You don't have to be an artist to be a 4, but often they are artists, because when you feel something deeply, there's an impulse to express it, and that's what artists often do. 4s are the deep sea divers of the psyche. They let people know what's meaningful in the room. And are you that, Roach? You feel like that's true about you?
Okay, yes.
No, honestly, does it seem true for you?
For me, most definitely.
Right. And the young 4 gets the idea that it's not okay to be my sensitive heart. And in fact, 4s get this idea that people get abandoned. 4s often have such a sense of abandonment. And you could have a good childhood and also still have a sense of being that there was nobody there for me. And so the solution, 4s tend to be driven by this emotional driver called envy. A different word for that is longing. Like, I'm longing for something. I see what you have, and what you have reminds me that I don't have it. And this longing is a churn for type 4s.
Okay, you're right. I am a 4. You're
okay,
right. Yeah.
There we go. And so, does this resonate with you, Roach?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, what's the part of you that you can see? How did being someone who senses what's true and meaningful, to senses beauty, how is that something that helped you to survive when you were growing up? How is that useful to you?
It helped me to know where and where not to be, or how to be and how not to be. When something was needed to be, when I sing, it helped me to recognize things, people, when they were safe and when they weren't.
So the heart center lets us know that we're connected, and you could use that as a way of figuring out when you were like other things and when you could lean in, or when you could make yourself apart from things. Is some of what you're saying?
Yeah, when you say connected, I for a long time did not identify myself as wanting to be connected with anything. But I was, but we did the class, I noticed that I would do it, but there were tests, I guess I would call them tests, where I would remove myself and say, it's not for attention, but if you don't see me after I remove myself, then it's not real. Or if I'm talking to somebody and someone cuts in and they start having a conversation with that person, I will leave that conversation. And then if they say come back, I said, no, it's done. It's over, it's a wrap. Because you broke the connection. It's not that I don't hold any, but it's over.
So when you're in a relationship and you feel tension or pain, do you have a tendency to withdraw and kind of isolate? Yeah, I'm the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that, but that's part of the temperament, right? It's just the impulse. but it's a bit of a distortion if you understand it, because 4s really want to be connected. But as you're withdrawing, you're looking over your shoulder wanting, did anybody notice that I left, right? You're still tracking the group and wanting to be connected with people, but the impulse is to pull away. And so the extraordinary thing is that the abandonment that you think is happening out here for type 4 is a deep dive to realize it actually first has to happen inside. Yes?
Yeah, I feel it. I know it. But so even though that is the way it is, and I've been recognizing that in the classes, because I've been through the Enneagram like 10 times. You know, I bang this is what I do. But even it's still, until I feel like it's connected to the person, it's empty, it's not real, it's not authentic. It's pretend, we're make-believe.
Right.
I remember this, I think it was you that did this podcast about creatures, right?
Yes.
I don't know if some of you have heard it, but Roach is, in his podcast, is talking about cockroaches or maybe not cockroaches, but critters of all kinds.
And a lot of them. Yeah, I had birds, lizards, snakes, bugs, snails, hamsters, gophers, everything in the cell. And that's just in prison. Spiders. Yeah, they hang. Yeah.
And what got me about it is your deep sense of connection with these creatures.
Yeah.
So here they're not even human, or maybe because they're not human beings. What is it about them that allowed you to connect with them so deeply? Or what is it about you that allowed you to connect with them so deeply?
I'm gonna have to go back just to what he was saying. That they relate when you talk to when you have them. It's unconditional. They're not looking to get anything from you. You have a snake. You know the snake may bite you and kill you, but that's what a snake does. Not on purpose. If you have a rat, the rat is going to come by, hang out, eat, and go and chill, and hang out. But you know what to expect. There's no hidden motives. They accept you, and I'm good with that. Even if it does, like Steve Irwin, he died by being killed by a manta ray, was it? But it didn't do it on purpose. And he's like, that's all right. I know when he dies, he's like, don't trip. You good. It was my fault for swimming over you that way. So there's no mount. The animals don't kill each other for fun, unless they're trained. And even then, I've seen where animals like, dude, I don't want to do it, but they don't do it. They don't try. They don't have the hatred and malice in their hearts that I find in a lot of people.
But what's beautiful is that you recognize it with creatures. So there's something in you that has that resonance, that capacity. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So what was it that gave you the impression when you were growing up that it wasn't safe for you to stay connected?
Oh, well, my childhood was not happy. And I don't normally talk about it unless there's something to be gained for somebody else. Me, I wouldn't have been raised any different. I would have gone through the same sufferings because it makes me this stupendous individual you see here. However, and I say this in all sincerity, that early on my mother made it clear that I couldn't trust her, that she was unable to give me that love.
Right.
Because she had things she was going through, so there was a lot of abuse. And then that continued years later. So early on, it was like, yeah, that's not what you do. And then you find ways, like you said, when there was an instance where I wanted to hug her, but I didn't because I knew, she's gonna go upside your head. And I navigated away from that. I knew when and when not to be near people.
Mm-hmm.
So it became ingrained in me on how to avoid people until I was able to become the person who, okay, you can't hurt me now, but I'm still hurting.
So I just want to pause because I think Gabor can say something helpful and insightful for all of us with regards to addiction and this pattern, because there's a way that you have an innate knowing about whether it's safe or not safe to be with a creature, to be with my mom, right? That's always been about you. And as your intelligence, what you did with that later is you withdrew, right? That helped you to I think Type 4 knows how to go up in my mind, and I create a fantasy that's nicer than the world I'm living in. I can live in the past. I can live in other ways. Is this true?
Yeah, most definitely, yes. Yes, you know, my imagination is really good. I think in pictures, so if I hear a story, read a book, I have a movie going on. And then there's always a movie going on anyway.
Right. And sometimes you can make the movie more beautiful in your mind than it is in your reality.
It always is.
Right. And so I think that we actually have a dopamine hit wired right into our type structure, that's sort of the way you can alter your chemistry for a minute so that you don't have to be in the reality that is your life. That's what you learned to do when you were a child. Yes?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But there became a time when now people couldn't do it, and now I still felt that way. So I would help people understand how I felt by, I hurt them.
Well, what you're saying is there's still a need for somebody to see me, because that whole thing about childhood, if that's not satisfied, there is an inherent drive in us to make that happen. And it happens when I'm looking over my shoulder saying, didn't anybody notice that I was leaving? So as an adult, you're still waiting to be seen. And the way you're doing it by withdrawing and going up in your mind sort of takes the edge off. But it's not the same thing.
Well, let me ask you a question here. So if I may ask you a personal question, if it's not comfortable, just tell me.
I'm good. I mean, the story's out there.
Yeah. So I noticed I make an observation about you, which may be accurate, maybe not, but this is just what I'm noticing. I'm talking with you and really enjoying the conversation. And sometimes when we're speaking, you kind of look to the side. There's a kind of funny smile on your face. Are you aware of that? You're doing that or not?
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I'd just be curious what's happening inside you when you kind of look away and you're kind of smiling a bit.
Oh, so when I look away, I picture things that put what is being spoken about in context. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't, but visual. It just everything comes to me in vision, in a visual way.
And
or sometimes it resonates, and I'm like, yes.
okay. So is the smile a kind of smile of recognition, maybe?
Yeah, most times, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. What's it like to be a kid? I think Susan asked you this before, but let me rephrase it for you. What's it like to be a kid that does see things go so clearly, much more clearly than other people? But you can't share that knowledge because they just don't get it. What's that like?
Difficultingly frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you must spend a lot of time being frustrated.
Yes. Very angry.
Yeah, I get it.
You spoke about anger earlier, and it's like, that's why. So the anger, it's almost like I was addicted to anger. I may still be addicted to anger.
In what sense?
That I go to it. Whether it's something happened, I want to try to, I'll go to it immediately. The anger is the go-to. And if I don't go to the anger, it's as if I'm doing myself a disservice.
I think you're really uncovering something interesting about type 4, and then Jason, I want to bring you into the conversation. But type 4 is a type that is complex because you're so sensitive, right? And it's an overused word, but you truly do feel things that people around you don't feel, and so do you, Gabor. That's why you're so on the road so fast. And the gift of the type 4 is being able to lean into that and being able to sense that about somebody else. But if it was a quality that your mom could have seen in you, it could have really taken root. Instead, it became something that you sort of hid or contracted or not, lots of different things with. And what we notice about 4s is that they deeply want to be connected, but they end up putting lots of hurdles up in order for people to connect with them. And then they say, see, nobody's there for me. Right? And part of the sensitivity that I feel makes me special, makes me sort of above you, like you don't get me. And even if somebody might want to get you, you're kind of looking out of the side of your, with a little smile over here, you're sort of half here and not here, right? There's a complex dance inside of you that makes you hard to connect with other people, but desperate too.
Yeah, I don't trust it. I don't trust people's desire to connect with me where I'm at.
Right, and of course, why would you? Because your early experience was the world's not safe.
So that's okay, so great. So if full trust is 10 and no trust is 0, and I just really want your honest thought. I don't want anything made up. If 0 is no trust, 10 is full trust, what is your trust level right now, just at this very moment?
For who?
For this situation.
For this room?
Yeah, for where you are right now and the people that you're with, and yeah.
Oh, everybody, it's going to be relative because I don't trust easy. So I'm open to trust, but to be a trusting person, I would have to put it at 2. And then it goes from there to where the person or the people I'm dealing with, different, like, I'll give you an example. I trust those 2. Trust Sonny some. Don't know much, know him, but I have spoken to him and trust him. I can go around here and engage everybody's level of trust. Some I just met tonight. And trust him like 6. Don't know why. This gentleman 5, you're up there with 7. Susan 11, just because. A piece. You know, a whole EPP. First of all, the individuals who come in with EPP, I generally trust them because I do not know why they come in here. Mm-hmm. I feel sometimes even myself that I'm not, that I don't deserve what it is that comes. So the trust, I can gauge a lot of people on different levels on where I trust. That man in the back with the big head, my partner, I trust him like a 7 and sometimes like a 1.
So Roach, here's a law. Where your attention goes, your energy will follow. Right? So you look at person by person, and a bit of your energy is going out all those different places. So Gabor asked you a very insightful question, which is, where are you right now? And your attention naturally goes out to where is everybody else and where can I trust? But if you come back to you,
trusting me?
I'm just asking you to come back to you just for a second. Take a breath. Feel your feet. And without anybody else listening, where are you?
I don't know the question.
Where are you?
Me?
Inside of yourself, without regard to everybody else. It's a harder question.
I'm very, there's a lot going on, so right now I'm a 3. I'm below the line, but I'm willing to shift.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So all we're noticing is that there's a patterned way in which we respond, and when we recognize the pattern, you can recognize that you're not the pattern, you're the person that's watching the pattern.
Well,
there's an observer.
Can I ask you a couple of questions again?
Yes.
Is that good? Yes, he says, looking at me sideways. How much do you trust yourself?
I can hear you.
How much do you trust yourself?
Not a lot.
Yeah. So that's the issue. Because if you 100% trusted yourself, you wouldn't have to trust anybody else or not trust them. You would just know immediately. You wouldn't have to work at who can I trust, because you could just trust yourself, and your true self will tell you right away. So one of the things that trauma does is we lose the trust for ourselves. You know, we just lose it. Babies have trust in it. Babies trust their bodies. When it tells them they're hungry, they're hungry. When they're sad, they're sad. When they're happy, they're happy. Trauma, that wound that I talked about, we lose the trust for ourselves. So I'm thinking that for you, should you choose to take it on, a great project would be to explore and work on self-trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
And I don't know where to begin, but yes.
Yeah, no, but this is where you need the help.
But the Enneagram is the map that lets you know where to begin, because the habit of mind for type 4 is to be frustrated with the world, that the world is not what I hoped it would be, and my focus out here is incredibly frustrating. But when you bring it back in, there is a part of you that's enough, and the creatures know it, the creatures resonate with it, and it's in there. What's the part we see?
And I find it really easy to focus on not trusting the world.
Yes,
focus
it's a habit.
To me is difficult every day.
So well-worn path. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. How you doing, Jason?
I'm well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the panel.
You're welcome.
Type 7 is in the head center of intelligence. These are the types that are filtering the world through my mind. And we'll continue to talk about the mind. And these are the types that are navigating my self-trust. And 7 has an interesting strategy on it. Sevens come to teach the rest of us about what freedom is and what joy is. And it's often not what we think it is. The young seven gets the idea that the world limits people and traps me, and I feel like if I'm a 7, I feel like I'm going to get stuck there forever. So the solution 7s come up with really early is there's not enough nurture coming my way. I'm going to make my own fun. I'm going to make my own way out, and I'm going to have my own possibilities. And so they look out in the world and they see all the different ways that they could get to the end result, and they keep their options open. And there's an emotional driver inside of 7 called gluttony. And the gluttony is like, if something's good, more is better. And if I'm gonna go get I'll use my favorite 7 example because I'm married to one, Coke at a 7-Eleven, I'm gonna get a super double big gulp that's refillable, because why would you get a little one, right? The gluttony is just more. And it's not even just about food, it's about the stuffing of my mind, because I wanna have the possibilities and I can't be limited. And I'm wondering, does this resonate with you?
Yeah, I'm definitely a glutton. I've and pretty much for everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything that gets me to, I suppose, feel a different way.
Right. So I started with the part about 7 and freedom and joy. And is there a part of you that knows that essential quality in describing the part of you that just knows a joy inside of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely an eternal optimist, and I always wonder how other people don't see how beautiful life is.
Mm. What's beautiful
even,
in this?
Even sitting in San Quentin.
Exactly. What's beautiful in here?
Everything, connection, the people. There's just a good vibe in the room. I'm here.
Right. That's right. And 7s bring the sparkle. You've got little crinkles from all your smiling all your years.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You talked about the longing. I mean, I listened to you talk. I just want to punch you. Because I mean, I understand totally. I understand completely what you're saying. And I'm not in prison, and I got not any external prison anyway, and I got all kinds of things going for me. But that celebration or appreciation for life, that just comes so hard for me. And I rarely actually ever feel it, despite all kinds of great things. So I'm just curious with you, Susan, if you're calling that an Enneagram type, but you say they teach the world. So what could Jason teach me about that? And how would he do it?
Right.
Not just by telling me about it, because I've heard it before, and I understand it, and I appreciate it. I just don't get it.
Right. Well, I think that, thank you for putting yourself in the panel. Isn't that cool?
Well, it's just how it is.
It's not always that way. I think that it's much easier to locate the part of ourselves we can't stand by seeing it in somebody else than it is to recognize that's me. And you're doing both. You're saying, I'd like to punch Jason, but I know that's in me, right? So what is it about seeing somebody's joy that pisses you off so much?
It's that envy that you mentioned.
Right.
That goes
so
along
he
with
has this thing that I don't have.
Yeah, it's this belief that I have, which is,
right.
I'm sure intellectually is not true.
Right. So.
But the belief is that he's got something I don't have. Not that I don't have, I don't even know how to get.
Right. So what in this moment is making you envy Jason? We all came to hear you.
Well, I'm just telling you, the anger is not a. Well, I did say I want to punch him, didn't I? I was exaggerating. I don't really want to punch you.
We're not filming it or anything.
No,
it's okay.
it's. Well, Eckhart Tolle, the teacher, once said that whenever there's anger, there's always pain underneath it.
Right.
So it's the pain of of the belief of not having something that you've got, that you show me, but I can't have it. That's the pain.
So I'll tell you something, and then I'm going to come back to Jason, that on the Enneagram, type 1, which is my type, type 4, which is your type, and type 7, which is Jason, are one from each center of intelligence. And these are what we call the idealists. Okay. Type 1 see how, if everybody knew the Enneagram, we'd have world peace, for example, and every jail and prison. Type 4 saying if only we were talking about something meaningful, then we would have something deeply connecting. And type 7 sees all the different possibilities. So 7 from the head, you from the heart, and me from the instinctual belly center of intelligence. We're all eternally idealistic and chronically frustrated. Yeah. Right? And so the interesting thing is that these are a triad of connection on the Enneagram, which means that there's a 7 in you, and the part that you're reacting to is Jason's trying to reflect it back to you, but for some reason you don't want to receive it. So let's let him teach us about 7, and then we'll come back to you. Okay?
Yeah, go ahead. No, you don't need to come back to me.
We can.
I was just noticing my reaction.
It's awesome. Yeah. And I think that's what the type does, right? Type is with us always, even when you're Gabor Maté. And this is why everybody fell in love with Gabor the first time he came to San Quentin, because he leads with the real stuff. And that's the way we all want to keep it. But you come to teach us about joy, yeah? But joy is not necessarily what we think it looks like, right? And I know you've been journeying yourself quite a bit. So what can you teach us about joy? What's real in you that's joyful?
Say the last question. Say the question again.
What's real in you that's joyful?
I have a deep love of life, and I can see that even my negative experiences now, I can see that even my negative experiences and my negative emotions, if that's what you want to call them, negative, although I don't even know that it's really could be called that. But even sadness, there's joy waiting to be had.
Yes.
When I'm sad.
Right. The part I think, and I'm quickening it just for sake of our time, the part that pisses the 4 off is that there's a tendency for 7 to skip the sad and reframe it and go back to the happy. And the part that I think that 4s in particular say, with, is like, that's not exactly real. How do you know joy if you never put your big toe in sadness? If you've never been here, how do you know you're happy actually? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and for years I did run from sadness.
Right, and why did you do that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I was scared of it. I don't know. I just had a lot of, looking back on it, I had a lot of, I just didn't want to feel sad. I didn't want to feel angry.
What gave you the impression that it wasn't okay to feel sad when you were little?
Well, I was, my father was an alcoholic and an addict, and he was a perfectionist, and he was, he expected, he expected perfection out of, especially me. I was his only child. But out of most people, he sort of expected more than he.
So your father was in pain and he drank, and that made an unsafe environment for you. And what did you do? What did you do as a child to make that okay for yourself?
I did lots of things. I did many different things. I did lots of activities. I kept myself extremely busy.
Right. And how did that work?
It worked well, I guess, in that I didn't experience a lot of sadness, and I didn't experience a lot of the sadness and the anger that was wanting to sort of bubble to the surface.
So 7 is an expert at distracting myself from here. And it worked until, did it work forever?
No, absolutely not. No, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. So my life got really miserable at times.
So here's my question. So here's my question for you then. There's all this joy and all that. When you drank, you must have wanted something from the drink. It must have given you something that you appreciated temporarily, at least. What did it give you?
I think it gave me a sense of belonging.
Okay.
The first time I drank to a blackout, and it was at a party that was, I like I said, I didn't when I as a child, I would say my childhood was characterized by a lot of fear,
Yeah.
and a lot of secrets.
Right.
There was my stepfather was abusive and extremely physically abusive, and my father was, emotionally and verbally abusive, and I didn't tell anyone about any of that. There was somehow intuitively I knew not to go and tell
So
people.
you're quite isolated. Emotionally, inside you were quite isolated.
Right.
And so the drinking gave you a sense of belonging.
I think a sense of belonging to a group of people, and I think it gave me an escape too from that loneliness.
Right.
At the same time.
Well, thank you. And the reason I'm asking is because people always talk about. Did you become an alcoholic? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So you became an alcohol addict, and people always think of addiction as either a choice that somebody makes, or as a disease that they somehow develop or inherit. And what I'm saying about addiction is just sort of what you just exemplified, which is that addiction is not a disease and it's not a choice. It's actually an attempt to solve a problem in life. And the problem is, in this case, emotional pain that you wanted to escape, and a sense of isolation that you wanted to overcome. And so that addiction always begins as an attempt to solve a problem. And so you always have to ask in a person, what problem did the addiction come along to temporarily solve in your life? I mean, we all know that it creates all kinds of problems, but not right away. First, it solves the problem temporarily, and we're desperate for temporary solutions. And so that you always have to ask not why are you addicted, but what problem did the addiction solve for you, and how did you develop that problem? And this is where we go back to childhood trauma. And you've talked about what your trauma was. I mean, there was probably more than what you've told us, but you've talked about it so that we can understand it. So the addiction is never wrong in a certain sense. It's always right. It always comes along for a understandable and temporarily positive reason. Trouble is, it then creates more problems than it solves.
And I would throw in that I think also the personality is also right. The intelligence for you to reframe it and to be someplace else and to have another option to be anywhere but in my home was the gift that sevens are like the life of the party, and that's part of that same impulse. But it only took you so far, and then you had to reach for something, alcohol, hoping that would take you out of it, and that only gets you so far. So what's amazing to me is that you can do all of that and then end up in an Enneagram classroom, end up on a panel here with Gabor, and look at it and say, well, how are those dots connected? And actually, if you go all the way back to the source and you start figuring out, why didn't I get that in the first place? How can I give that to myself now? And are you aware of how is it that you're giving yourself the nurture that you didn't get when you were small by being in this panel, for example?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that I'm nurturing myself now. Take care of myself physically, emotionally, and spiritually now.
Right.
And I didn't for many years, but I've been clean and sober for it'll be 2 years on the 13th.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. And it's been a lot of there's been a lot of introspection and a lot of digging around inside to try to figure out. Because basically I am the type of person who really loves life, and right before I came in this time, like it's been building, like my personality, I want to see the silver lining in everything. I'm like I said, I'm a diehard optimist, so I could keep on turning everything, into gold.
Right.
That wasn't really, that was.
So the trick
crap.
is being able to recognize, by being present enough to recognize when you're snowing yourself and you're pushing to be having more fun when actually you're missing all the magic that's right here in this moment.
Right. Yeah. And now being present is, that's what I intend to do daily. It's
Right.
and it's something that I have to intend to do. It's not something that just comes naturally for
No.
me. It's something that I have to, put work into. I pray and meditate every morning, and I read, have readings. I read the Bible and some of the Buddhist scriptures, and I write a gratitude list, and I write a list of attributes I want to embody throughout my day. I do that every morning,
Right.
and that sort of sets my day up. And then throughout the day, if I need to take a break and meditate or pray, that's what I do.
Well, thank you for highlighting what they are that you're doing. Our time is short, so I'm going to end with that. But I want you to know that Jason's personality is the same personality as Robin Williams, right? Or Jim Carrey. Both of those types are 7s. And so what you're seeing instead is what the high side of 7, which is called sobriety. And I don't mean that you're not drinking. I mean that you're not insisting that we go on the ride of being a fun 7, right? And that's actually a different kind of joy and a different kind of freedom that you're speaking to. I want to thank all of you for being on the panel. Thank you, guys.